Hello, welcome to this video. In this video, we will talk about UseEffect, which is one of the hooks in React.js. Okay, in my previous video, I created a simple application to demonstrate what is useState. So in this video, we will focus on useState and UseEffect to create our application. Okay, so before we go back to code, I would like to give you a pictorial idea of what is going on when you're using UseEffect in React.js. Okay, so the logic or our main aim is that we want to pull some data which is not us who created but from a different server and use it in our application. So take this picture on the left hand side, that's a React logo here as our React application, and the server sitting somewhere, and we're going to make use of called JSON placeholder, which is a server different from our server. Okay, so we want our React application to talk to this server and pull some data from this server into our React application. Okay, so how can we make that request? We are going to make use of a tool called Axios. Okay, it is HTTP client which talk to a server and give us response. And you can use fetch, which is by default, but I found out that Axios is really simple to use than fetch in my opinion, so I'll go for Axios for now. Okay, so this had a logic start. Now I'll make the request to the server, and then the server gives me back the response, the data here, and I display it into my React application. Yeah, so this is the logic behind when you're making requests, but under the hood there's a lot of going on talking about promise, and I don't want to go back to back-end stuff. Yeah, so this server sitting somewhere, maybe when you're making the request it can slow down or whatever. Anything can happen, error or network, whatever. So how? But remember, our React application run as fast as possible. As soon as you run your application, the component, within some milliseconds, the component runs. Okay, and it's a component which renders the data that you need. So now let's go back to the next picture of this. Okay, now this let to understand what is going on now, right? So when you're making the request, maybe the request might delay, but our React application, as soon as you run it, it runs within some second. Okay, but what about if you're making requests and the network is really slow, so that maybe the data that is coming back is delayed? React don't care about what is you're fetching, because just do my job, it will display the render the component within some second, but the data is not yet maybe fetched or maybe fetched from the request that you made. Okay, so the data is still pending, but our React application has already rendered. So how? As soon as the data comes back from the server or the request, how are we going to tell React that, okay, React, we have got the data, so display it? So React says, wow, I have already rendered, so how can I make use of that data that is arrived after I have rendered? So, but UseEffect says, don't worry, I will allow React to render again. So UseEffect is going to trigger React component to render again. That, okay, React, the data I was waiting for has finally arrived. Okay, so take it and then render it. So UseEffect will, behind the scene, do some logic or some magic behind the scene and then cause the React application to render. So that is the whole logic about what UseEffect. UseEffect is a way of re-render what your component based on condition. And the condition here is that when data is what fetched, render again. So this is the logic behind UseEffect. So without much talking, let's go back to code and start doing something. So the application we are going to build is to display list of posts from this server. Okay, so I have already have my React application being created and it's running on my port 3000. Okay, so before we continue, I would like to trash, okay, for this project I don't want to make it so let's deal like that. So let's go to our app.js. Okay, and inside the div, let's trash everything from here and just write here h1, let's say um, list of posts. Okay, so let's see, I have my list of posts here in my web browser. Okay, so now we are going to make use of what? Use effect to create that application. So let's go to our code here, and since it's a hook, we need to pull it from what? From React. Okay, so let's import React, then let's pull out use effect from here. Okay, let me say from React, so I give me auto import. Okay, so let's make use of use effects here. Okay, now because we are going to make use of third-party tool which is called Axios, we have to install it. So let's go to our terminal here, and then let's just install yarn at, if you're using yarn, it's npm I Axios. Okay, so while it's waiting, let's run our server again. Okay, so let me clear my console and then yarn start. Okay, so let's go back to code. So let me delete. Okay, it's okay now. So let's make use of the use effect that we are talking about. So use effect is a function, okay, that we call it inside your functional component, and this takes in a function as a callback. Okay, and remember, this use effect takes in two arguments. One is a function, okay, and one is array of what? Data. And this array of data is what is going to tell use effect to render again, to be more clear when you see with code. So our function is what? Array function here as the first argument, and the next one is array. Okay, this array takes in a couple of variables or values, okay, that will cause use effect to render. If you give it empty array, what you are telling React is that React render this data only once. Okay, so let's leave like that, and then inside our callback function here, let's just say console.log. Okay, say I'm called. So let's see how it's going to be displayed. So let's go back to our browser. Inside our console, as seen here, as we see, I have called. So we are going to make use of this effect to make a request to that server. And the server you are going to make use is called JSON placeholder. Okay, so we are going to make use of this endpoint when you come here under post. Okay, click on post, and you're going to use this HTTP endpoint, sorry, the URL to fetch this data into applications. We're going to pull this data from this server into our React application. Okay, so copy the link to your clipboard, and then inside our use effects, before that, let's import Axios that we installed. Okay, it says Axios from Axios. Okay, like that. Good. Next, we have to find a way of managing a state. So when data comes back, where are you going to store it? That brings us to another hook called useState, as we described. This is going to be a place where we are going to what? Save our data when it's fetched from our server. So take useState as a database, right? Where we are going to store your data. Okay, so let me delete this white space here, and then let me call this one use effect. Okay, because maybe use effect here, and then our use state will be above here. So use state, I have and then post, right? I'm going to, okay, let me make it this way. Okay, so use state takes in, right, initial value. So our initial value here will be what? Array of objects. Okay, and we have two important things coming out from this use state. Okay, the first one is what? The value that holds our initial state and the function to update the state. Okay, so now we have an empty array which is post. Okay, so we're going to make requests to our server, but remember one caveat thing about UseEffect: you cannot mark UseEffect as an async. Okay, I'm gonna make use of async await here because I'm going to deal with promises. We don't know when our data will be back, so we have to make use of what? Promises in our project. Okay, so because of that, we have to create a function and then assign it as an async and then call it inside our UseEffect. Okay, so here we are going to create a function inside UseEffect. So let me call this one fetch post. Okay, so const fetch post, okay, will be my arrow function. It won't take any parameters, and I have to mark my function as an async. I don't want to use of promises. Okay, and so first I mark my function as async, I have the opportunity to mark my request as await. Okay, so let's declare a variable as a response which comes back from our request, and we are going to make use of await of what? Axios. We are going to make use of what? Network request. So axios.get. Okay, we are getting something from different server, and we pass in our URL, the server we are going to pull that from JSON placeholder. Okay, copy this link and then paste inside the get. Okay, so here we can console.log response, that is res. Okay, and see now we've called a function. Sorry, we have what? Created. We need to call it. So call it inside UseEffect. So let me call it here as what? Call the function. Okay, like that. So fetch post, like that. So now as soon as this application runs, you see something in the console because this function just console of the response. So let's go to our application, refresh it, and then as you can see, we have an object which has 100 data as an array instead of okay. So we only need the data here. Okay, when you open it, you see a bunch of data coming from that server. So let's grab that data only, which is .data. Okay, now save it and let's see. That's what we are expecting, 100 posts. Okay, so now this data is now available in our React application. How are you going to save this application into our React application and then display it? Okay, that and us to use state. So you have to save this data into this post. So how can we save it? Initial value was empty array, and now we want to update it to the data that is coming from this request. That's why I'm going to make use of set post and then update the post. So as soon as the data comes back like this, we will say that, let me say update state. Okay, so set post. Okay, set post like that, and then I pass in the array of data as res.data here. Okay, now we are good to go. When I console log, come outside your UseEffect, console log the post. Now the post holds the array of data now. So when you console log it, as you can see, save it as exactly as we have this data now available in our React application. So how can we take this data from this console and then place it inside our browser, okay, to the user? So that is also end us to another concept called how to map using for each or map or whatever. So we're going to make use of map to loop through this data and display it into our application. Okay, remember we want to display it inside our hot, so we can create a function and then map through, but I want to make this application very simple, so I have only one file called app.js. So here let's make use of JSX and then all the posts, okay, and then .map. This .map is a how other function which takes in a function as a callback, okay, and we have the data. I'll call this one a single as post. Okay, and let's return. Okay, I can quickly return GSX like that. Okay, and here let's have a div. Okay, here, and let's just display here just a fetch data like that. So let's go to our browser. As you can see, we have fetch data 100 times because we have 100 word posts. So this map will look through the individual items inside our data. Okay, so now instead of fetching this static data, we want to display the post. And on this post, let's console log the post again and see the kind of property that we can use inside application. So let's go back to our console here, refresh it. Okay, as you can see, at first it was empty array, right? So let me see. Now let's see on the data we have one. What do I have on my data here? Okay, on the first data we have the body and the title. Okay, so I need only the body and the title. So to grab that, since it's an object, I will have h1 here. Let me make it h1, not h. Okay, like that. Sorry, on my side. So it is h1 here. Then let me grab on post. I have title. Okay, like that. Save it. Go to the application. As you can see, we have the title. And now let's also display the body. So I embed it inside my paragraph, and then post.body. Okay, save it. As you can see, we have it available inside our application. Okay, so let's make it underline. Let me use this HTML element here, and then as you can see, we have what 100 posts. So now we can even display that. So here, post, let me make it equal to my GSX, and then post.length. Okay, that gives me the total length of my post. As you can see, 100 posts. Okay, so guys, this is how we use what UseEffect and useState to pull information from our data. So before we close, let me talk about this last argument here, this array. Like I told you, this array takes in a couple of variables, and UseEffect will depend on this data here. If you provide empty array, UseEffect will call this function only once. Okay, but if you pass in some arguments, so let's say values like post here, what you are telling UseEffect is that when you fetch this post and it is 0, as soon as there's some data coming back, call this function again or render my UseEffect again. Okay, so if you save it and then you have it here, we have exactly as we have. But if you are running on a slow network, I think passing this one will be very useful, because you don't know when the data will fetch back from the server, and as soon as it comes from the server, then because of this variable we pass into this UseEffect argument array, it will cause our UseEffect to render again. Okay, so guys, this is how you use UseEffect in React.js.